let's start off with the first question they hit with you with, which is AI. And so they asked you whether or not you felt AI was going to take over the world, kill all of humanity, and be devastation, right? Because that's, the fear sells in this department. So give me your feelings on where do you think AI is going?
Well, I think if we're concerned that machines are going to take over or humans are not going to be able to survive without machines, or machines are going to destroy humanity, that already happened. We're already in the middle of that. Humans have evolved physiologically and mentally to the point where we can't survive without machines. The clothes, the food we eat, all of these things require machines, right? So we're already entirely dependent on machines. And I hate to say this, but news media and social media are entirely destroying humanity. They are polarizing us. It's a race to the bottom with every idea and every way to be human. So machines or, the use of technology is already destroying us. And so seeing people write on social media or talk in the news or watching films about how AI might destroy us is so ironic and ignorant, because whoever's writing that or telling those stories isn't really aware that we're already having our humanity. It's hard to say these things without swearing, to be honest.
Right.
But I really want to swear because it makes me really mad.
Well, science fiction takes it to the absurd level and then populates it with what that worst case scenario would be when, AI decides that human beings are disposable and takes it to that natural end. So.
Yeah. But the truth is we're already at that point. Humanity is already being or has been destroyed. So what I believe actually is that AI is the thing that can save us, because AI could detoxify social media. AI could detoxify news media. For example, AI could allow you to know what's true and what's not true, what's fact and what's fiction, what's a lie and meant to push you in one direction. AI could allow you to control your own algorithm, for you to choose what you consume, what you see, what you don't see. So I actually see AI as the antidote to something that's already killing us and consuming us and destroying humanity. So that's my take.
And I agree with you that if AI could be sort of like an objective arbiter of truth, but how do you depoison what truth is and mathematically define, what's a truth and what's not? Being that the sample that it would have access to probably has a lot of that stuff in it.
Yeah. So obviously, there are many truths. There is no single truth. And truth is different to fact. And, fact is should be something that we can all agree on. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be, but it should be something that we can all agree on. There's a microphone in front of me is a fact, right? Whereas truth is something that comes with perspective. Because truth is what is your truth? What is my truth? What is true to me? So it's a very different thing. And actually, it's not that truth or fact, one is better than the other. Facts can be used to distort the truth. So I could shove a bunch of facts at you that are utterly irrelevant to the thing that we're talking about, but you're unable to dispute them, and make someone or gaslight someone into believing, or distorting a truth. So I think it's important to understand the difference between truth and fact, and that irrelevant facts can be used to distort the truth. So an AI would need to understand what truth is to you, what you want to hear, what perspective you might want to hear, which actually you might be able to choose to hear the other side without it being toxic, because you can't hear the other side's perspective at the moment without it being toxic or triggering to you. So we could actually get a more balanced view of everything that's around us if we were to have access to control what we see and how we see things.
Yeah, and I think we need more complicated brains to really suss this out, because that perspective that you were talking about, if I had 100 people in this room and they all said the sky is purple, and I said, well, no, the sky is blue, right? Yeah. So truth is more about agreement more than it would be about an objective measurement of what blue is, because from their perspective, they might be looking up and purple is what they see.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. And I think I think, there's also just like, this is like slightly changing the subject, but just thinking about news media, the difference between news media and like amateur sort of like news, which is what anyone posts on social media, is that news media should be based on facts, should be things that we can all agree on, shouldn't be distorted in some kind of way. But unfortunately, it isn't always. And if it doesn't find its way to be factual, it's going to lose its place and relevance in the world. And I think that will be a shame, because I think we need professional journalism and news that's something we can rely on and trust.
All right, it's not every day that I get a physicist sitting in front of me. So I usually go into simulations and time travel and all that kind of fun stuff. But since I have you here, let's dig into the crazy a little bit, if you don't mind. And so like this new era of sort of space exploration and the vastness of space it is revealing a whole lot of what our brains are not, sort of like meant to be able to interpret. And so, when we're talking about, we had the solar eclipse and going to Mars, and it's getting renewed interest in people trying to contemplate what space and its, connection with human beings. So I'll start out with time travel. Okay.
Okay.
Is it a favorite of yours? Do you like talking about it? Tell me what your opinion on time travel, if it's possible, if it's worthy of a conversation.
I saw my daughter's Instagram the other day. My children don't let me follow them, and they don't follow me.
Okay.
And in her bio, I saw that she said she's a time traveler, and she is, and she got that idea from me, because I wrote that on I think I wrote that on mine too.
Okay.
I have traveled all the way from the summer of '69 to be here, which is when I was born, right?
In a straight line.
Straight line. Well, not so straight. And it was quite a bumpy and difficult journey getting here, so time travel is real. I've traveled from the summer of '69. It's very bumpy and very difficult and very challenging.
Okay.
But I feel that I was born then, ready for now. So I wasn't always fit and appropriate and ready for this journey. So I am kind of joking, and it's not really answering your question, but we are traveling through time.
Okay. Do you think you can alter the speed at which, or how you experience that time, where I can experience time differently than you can? So effectively having, like in that, I forget what movie it was, where they got too close to a black hole. They started to travel a little, and so they were experiencing time a lot slower than the people here on Earth, and 600 years have passed. Do you think that is a possibility?
I don't think that's a possibility. I think that's pretty certain. I think that's our understanding of how time works. If you travel close to the speed of light, then time goes significantly slower for you than it does for everyone else. That's my understanding.
Okay.
I hope I've got that right.
Right.
But that's my understanding. That's if you were to travel at the speed of light, and come back, you'd find everyone you knew long buried, I think.
Okay. Right. And can biologically, do you think we can harness that, where we can do things like that? Or do you think the body cannot survive going close to what would be meaningful in time?
It's really difficult to know, right? Because with so much science and scientists have told us that things are impossible. They can't be done. The rules of science say these things can't be done. And then we're doing them, decades or just a few years later, we're doing things that we've said were impossible. And there's a couple of things about science that people forget. Science is true until it's not true, right?
Right.
It's true until we find evidence that shows it's not true. And then we reconsider. It doesn't mean anyone was lying. It just means, to the best of our knowledge, every time we observe doing this is what happens. And then we start to see, things that prove that maybe there's a different way of looking at it. The second thing is that all science comes with boundary conditions, which is a little bit like the speed limit, on the road in a certain country, right? This is the law that says, the law of science or the law of speed, you can't go faster than this. But if you change into a different domain, a different place, the laws change.
It only existed on a plane that we're capable of understanding.
Yeah,
you add dimensional thought to it, and it's a whole different math.
Yeah, and that's often because the length scale changes. When things get smaller, now different physics applies. And that's because in any system, we might have a dominant force. So for example, say you have a plastic bucket with a hole in the bucket that's a couple of inches in diameter, and you fill that bucket with water, the water's going to flow through that hole. The smaller you make that hole, the rate of flow of water will change by the radius of that hole, right? But there's a force there opposing the water flowing through that's really, really small, and that's surface tension. And it's not going to affect the flow of water in any measurable way, well, generally in any way that you could observe. But once that hole gets small, once that hole gets to a few millimeters, the water will stop flowing. And that's because surface tension has now become a dominant force, and the water just won't flow through that hole in the bucket. That's an example of a boundary condition. So we've gone from one length scale to a smaller length scale. And I think something that maybe many people don't really understand what nanotechnology is, it's just that the physics gets different when we make things small. So for example, the wavelength of light is around like 450 or so nanometers, depending on the color, right? That's the wavelength of light, 450 nanometers, 450 billionths of a meter. So 0.45 of a micron, a human hair is about 30 microns. So just to give a sort of a sense of that scale. And when we were making things, electronic circuits, we're patterning those with light, basically using a photolithography, a photo process. We would have said it's impossible to pattern things smaller than the wavelength of light using light. It's impossible to create length scales of circuits smaller than 500 nanometers. The length scale now is around 4.5 nanometers that we can pattern things. It's the gate length of a transistor. That's, I hope I get this number right. So I think about 0.1 nanometers, I hope I got this right, is about the distance between two atoms. So we're patterning circuits tens of atoms across. We're having electrical currents to flow through wires that normally were huge swashes of electrons, hundreds of thousands of electrons going along a wire. We're now having flows of electricity that's down to just a few electrons. So when you had hundreds of thousands of electrons flowing, it's like an ocean of water flowing through something. You know, if you imagine the electrons are like water, when it comes down to that sort of size, it's like little marbles. And so electricity becomes a little chunky and a little bumpy. So yeah, nanotechnology is when we're making things significantly smaller than light. So the physics is entirely different, and electricity is entirely different at those length scales.
And that's a good transition into then quantum computers and going beyond and adding another dimension out of the binary system into something that is even smaller on the quark level. So give me your quantum next step in quantum computers, you think?
Oh, okay, right. I don't think I have necessarily all the answers on that, but the thing that's interesting about quantum computers is, it also just to me generally relates to life in general. We tend to live in a very polarized and sort of binary world, you know, yes and no, good and bad. The nice thing about that I like thinking about a sort of a quantum perspective is that the answer is everything. Every single answer is possible. Nothing is predetermined. Someone isn't good, someone isn't bad, this isn't going to happen, that isn't going to happen. Every single thing has a probability of happening. And it's only in the moment when you ask it the question, only in the moment when you flick the switch, does that probability become an actuality and become a thing. So, you know, yes, that can apply to quantum computing. Instead of having something that's binary, we have all these multiple possibilities. And in the moment when we ask it the question, the wave function collapses and it becomes a thing. But it's nice to apply that to our everyday life and to people, at least I do. I like to think of having a quantum state of mind. I don't have a predetermined opinion on how someone will act, who someone is. I know they'll probably act like this, or they'll probably do that, but I can't be certain. So I can give people the benefit of the doubt. So I find this sort of like quantum state of mind or quantum way of thinking really, really helpful.
Yeah, well, and I saw this pattern emerge where one of the analogies that I heard, like when you're thinking about like traffic, you know, you improve traffic by increasing speed, right? Then you increase the number of lanes, then you increase the number of dimensions. So it's like we make things smaller, we make things faster, we give it more bandwidth. But when you add that fourth, like that next dimension, I mean, it's just to an exponential level.
Yeah, yeah. And the same is happening in electronics as well, because most things and most chips were on a single level. So if we add that third dimension, and it's interesting when you add a third dimension, it like you say, it's kind of exponential, because a whole nother dimension, it goes up by the power. It doesn't scale linearly. There's something that comes to mind that I think about a lot is, and you mentioned quantum and quarks, and is length scale. And you mentioned the vastness of space, or I think you did. Mm-hmm. And we think how big space is. I don't think we're able to imagine, as humans, the vastness of how big space is. But it's also not it's bigger than we think, but it's also not as big as we think, in a different way, right? Because if we think of length scale on orders of magnitude, so 10 times bigger, 10 times bigger, 10 times bigger, 10 times smaller, 10 times smaller. So we were thinking on a logarithmic scale rather than a linear scale. If you think how small things can get, okay, this is maybe going to get a little confusing. Well, hopefully not.
No, I like where you're going with this.
Okay.
I think this is a good setup.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, like I was saying, the distance between two atoms is, I think it's 0.1 nanometers. So 10 to the power of minus 10, roughly, is the distance between two hydrogen atoms. Roughly, it might be like 510 to the minus 10 or something like that. And we're made out of atoms, right? But the smallest theoretical length scale is what's called a Planck length, which is kind of proportional to the speed of light and the gravitational constant. I forget exactly the equation, probably speed of light cubed, gravitational constant, can't quite remember. Anyway, related to the speed of light, the smallest length scale. And that's roughly 110 to the minus 35. I think it's 35. Minus 35, I think, right? So if you were to imagine, and this is not possible, if you were made out of, instead of atoms, Planck lengths, and you were, and a human is we've got this right. We've got these numbers right.
No, you're doing good. This is a good challenge. I love it.
So if we're like 1 to 2 meters in height, and the distance between two atoms is 10 to minus 10, then you are 10 to the atoms tall. So if instead you were 10 to the Planck lengths tall, so there's a mini you made out of Planck lengths now, you can fit as many mini yous inside you as you can fit you in the universe, the visible universe. Because the size of the visible universe, i.e. the point at which light can no longer return, is 10, I hope I got these numbers right, 10 to the 25.
An absurd amount.
An absurd amount. But the crazy thing is, there's as much space inside you for a mini you as there is for you in the entire universe. And when we look down to the length of atoms, we only go 10 to the minus 10. If we were to go to, like protons, neutrons, and lower, we're still only at like 10 to the minus 15 or 10 to the minus 20. There's a significant amount of smaller space that's going on that we've absolutely no idea. Beyond quantum. We kind of think of how vast space is, but we never really consider how vast inner space is on a logarithmic scale. And that kind of blows my mind, that I could fit as many me's inside me as I could fit me inside the universe. There's a whole universe size space, relatively, for things that are very small, inside all of us. That's crazy. Like, all
you
the
don't
information,
consider yourself being mostly space, but you totally
you're the size
are.
of a universe.
That's
all
crazy.
That information, or I mean, maybe the whole history of the universe could be stored inside every single atom. I don't see why not. Inside you.
And when I think about the scale of the universe, like I think of, what makes us think the consistency of the universe stays consistent all the way out through the further reaches. Like let's just say spacecraft started traveling outside of our solar system, and then the conditions change where it's almost like it's flying through soup. So it's not like it's vast. Yeah. It's just, from our perspective, it looks like it's taking forever when the viscosity of travel went through the roof. So But that perspective, that thought experiment, and I love when Einstein's one of my favorites for his taking your perspective and then twisting it around to say, you're on that locomotion traveling at the speed of light.
Yes.
What's everything look like around you? And that's like,
Yeah.
that would be cool. So here's my next crazy thought.
Okay.
And flat Earth, right? And so,
why is everyone obsessed with this? I thought we'd gotten over this, but it's all my Facebook feed shows me.
okay, well, we're going to talk about it differently. How about that?
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily want to say is or isn't, but I think what would you have to do to everything in order to take something that's observably a sphere and unwind it? Because if you do something to one thing, you have to universally do it to all things else. So what would, a three-dimensional universe have to do in order to unfold it? And is there a mathematical possibility that through other higher dimensions that you can deconstruct the the third dimensions to make a flat plane? And then what would everything look like around it once everything has been unwound that way?
Okay, I think this is nuts.
Yes.
Donuts. That's what I think it is. I think it's just donuts. Maybe the universe is a donut.
Maybe it's a donut.
Yeah. And maybe it's a spiral of donuts. And that this moment that we're having right now, it keeps coming around again and again and again and again.
Yeah, infinite.
But every time, slightly different. I was wondering, maybe the very edge of space takes you to the very edge of inner space, and you come back around in a loop.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. And that,
I mean, we're constructing all of our intelligence about what things are based on observable visual data. And if the spectrum doesn't reveal all the information and what we can perceive, like what's outside of it is what's concerning to me.
No, I think so. And I think it is interesting to think about it from a flat Earth perspective, because, before we realized the Earth was a sphere, and you said to someone, if you sail off into the sunset and don't hit land, you will eventually, a long time in the future, reappear from the other direction at the sunrise. And you're like, that's absolutely impossible. Like, how can that happen? So when in our world, there are things that just do not make sense, when the answer to something is both yes and no, when multiple things are true at the same time, it reasonably likely means that our sense of dimensionality of space and time is wrong. And so when we realized that the Earth wasn't flat, suddenly things that were so complex to understand just became obvious. Like, you wouldn't even ask the question. So I think because so much does not make sense in the universe, if we were to understand the dimensionality of space and time in a different way, in the same way as we realized that the Earth was a sphere, things that seem mind-bendingly difficult to get our head around would just seem really obvious. So maybe the universe is a spiral of donuts.
Maybe it is, and that's like, even when you think about the never-ending expansion of the universe, that being that you can't arrive at an answer that makes sense to the way that our brains function, there's more to it. And in that fourth or fifth dimension of understanding, maybe all of this stuff makes a lot more sense than it does.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd have to be super intelligent to understand some of these things. I just think it's the way we're looking at things is making it very, very complicated for anyone to understand. So much so that the smartest people on Earth can't understand things. But once we can find that different perspective, it may become so easy to understand that almost everyone can understand the things we thought were beyond even the smartest brain.
And the AI that will get smarter than us might be able to whisper the answer to us at one point and tell us what it is. We got to believe it, because we're not going to be able to contemplate it, right?
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. In 5 years, everything's going to be different. Like, it's so crazy. I just think every single thing in my life is going to be different because of AI, which is kind of crazy. I'm going to tell you about a book I read recently. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I was reading a book. It's like fiction, and it's about this person that went to the Southern Hemisphere, worked on a farm, and then got curious about what was over the mountains. Went over the mountains and came across a whole nother civilization of like 1 million people or so that had been there for a long time, but isolated from the rest of the world. And a few hundred years earlier, their leading scientist came to the conclusion that because of the evolutionary path of machines, and they thought the first machine was a stick, and that every machine evolved from the stick, so you could create an evolutionary family tree from the stick to all machines. They looked at when that started, when humans started. They looked at the rate of growth of the intelligence of that. And they came to the conclusion that machines were very quickly going to outsmart us and take over, and humans would become domesticated like a pet. We'd be there to help them with their young and rebuild them and oil them and all of those things. But the machines were going to take over. And they didn't like that thought. So they decided to destroy all machines, anything that was invented newer than 300 years ago. And they settled on about 290 years. And the last one they kept was the clothes mangle. And it led to a crazy world that they all lived in, and I could go into that. But the thing that blew my mind most of all about this book was that, I got this year right, I think it was published in 1872. So in 1872, if I've got that number right, and it's roughly around about then, only 10 years after Darwin published On Origin of the Species. This book's called Erewhon, 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 3 syllables, written by Samuel Butler. He knew Darwin, so published 10 years after On Origin of the Species and 10 years before the petrol engine, to know that people were concerned then that machines were going to take over and we had to destroy them in 1872.
And just think of what they had then that they were referring to as a machine that was so dangerous than humanity.
Yeah, steam engines was as advanced as they had, and they were concerned. So for people to start saying, oh, AI is going to take over, as if it's a new thought, to know that we've been worried about the rise of machines for such a long time. But like I say, I am excited about AI. I think AI is going to be the thing that actually saves us. And to know that they were worried about machines back then and didn't even have the concept of AI. There's a lot of toxicity from technology that is destroying humanity. We see our whole society breaking down. We're unfriending each other. We can't be in the same room as each other. People are extremely lonely. People have lost a sense of meaning, sense of community. We really are in trouble. So worrying about AI coming along and destroying us, we are going to be destroyed, whether or not. So I think our only hope is that AI will save us.
Yeah, I oscillate between the two because I think we're far too primitive to really do this well, because I believe that if you do it well, it's going to be a servant to humanity that fix a lot of problems that we're just seem to be incapable of fixing. But then, so the launch scares me of who's doing it and how quickly it happens and how much forethought goes into it. And then I'm like, well, humans are so depraved at this point that AI could probably conclude that it needs to be done different. And if it could, kind of short circuit us, it would be better. So I like it and hate it all at the same time.
It is scary. The thing is I look at it a little bit like the printing press, right? So, I mean, maybe you've considered it like this too. It's that before the printing press, very few people could read and write. And these were the people who were the arbiters of knowledge. So the printing press was the democratization of knowledge. And the people in, the powers that be, the kings and queens and whoever were terrified of the printing press. They were telling us it's going to destroy humanity. People are going to lose their lives. Civilizations are going to get overthrown. They were right. The printing press changed everything. And I'm glad.
For sure,
it did.
Absolutely.
I'm glad it did. And who are the people who were scaring us that AI is going to do this? It's the people in charge.
Yep.
It's the
kings
people
and queens
it's
again.
the kings and queens. It's the captains of industry. They're the ones that are saying that. And so I would be worried about AI that's only in their control. It has to be democratized in the same way as the printing press is. Everyone has a printing press at home, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. Everyone has access to a book. Everyone can read and write, generally, right? So everyone's going to have the access to intelligence. And, at the moment, you go through ChatGPT or you go forever and it's up in the cloud. But that's not going to be how it's going to be. That's how cloud computers work. Everything's in the cloud. AI is going to be not in the cloud, not just in the cloud. It's going to be on every single device. It's going to be everywhere. You're going to have your own personal AIs. I don't really read very much, so I have to say I'm a bit ignorant, right? So I don't read about any of these things. I play with things to learn. So what I did is I was curious if I could have an AI at home. So normally something like ChatGPT is, I think it's about it's what they call 170 billion parameter AI model. I don't exactly know what 170 billion parameter means. It's very big, and to run it requires probably a $30,000 graphics card from NVIDIA, right? But you can get much smaller AIs. You can get a 7 billion parameter AI. So I downloaded a 7 billion parameter AI model. It's not that smart. It's pretty dumb, to be honest. And I put it on a Raspberry Pi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Raspberry Pi. Yeah. Just for anyone that's not, a little computer size of a matchbox. So I installed an AI on a Raspberry Pi, on a little matchbox thing under my couch. And I can access it from my phone wherever I am using VPN and SSH. And I can chat with it. And it's an unrestricted model, uncensored model. So I can ask it anything. But I'm in control of it. It's my
private.
AI. Yeah. And I think that's what we're going to have more of. And yeah, like I say, it's pretty dumb. It's a bit slow, doesn't really give the right answers. But that's because it's trying to be general. If we were to make large language models, AIs that were very specific and 7 billion parameters or 2 billion parameters in size, they'd be able to run reasonably fast on our phone and be very smart at a specific thing. And that would be local, that would be private. And so I think that's what it has to be. AI in control of one company, that's very scary. But everybody having access to it, heads will roll, countries will fall, corporations will disappear. Yes, all those scary things will happen in the same way as the printing press brought about those things. And I think we'll end up living in a world where we're glad.
Yeah, and the analogy would be like if you take an adopted dog who's an adult, you inherit the training of someone else.
Right.
But if you take your AI from when it's a baby and you get to train it all the way up, it becomes a true servant to you as its master.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that makes me think slightly of another thing that I've played around with as well, which is so much fun. So one of the things that people find scary with technology is the mode or means with which you access something, right? So typing things into a computer at a command line, it's kind of a little scary, the green text and the flashing cursor. It's like, like war games or something is going on, right? So what I did is I got quite obsessed with this idea of red telephones. I have this idea that when adventure, I say this thing, when adventure calls, you have to pick up. Right? You don't have to say yes, but you have to take the call. And I always imagined that a red telephone would be my hotline to adventure. So I started buying red telephones and installing them around my home. I've one by my bed on the wall, one in the lounge, and then they don't do anything, or they didn't. And then I was like, what if I connected them to ChatGPT?
Oh no. So wait a minute. The red phone is the thermonuclear war games.
So I have them in my home. So I pick up an old-fashioned phone by my bed.
Okay.
And I say, hello. And then it says hello back. And it asks me how I am. And I tell it something. And then it asks me something about my day. And then we get into a conversation. And then it asks me about a time in my life of a certain thing. And I tell it. And then it asks me about another time in my life. And we chat for like half an hour. And then it tells me a bedtime story based on my life, based on a conversation that I had with it. But the amazing thing is, I don't feel like I'm talking to a computer. I don't feel intimidated. I'm picking up an old-fashioned phone and having a chat that's really meaningful. I can lay on my bed and chat to ChatGPT through the telephone for hours. Like I'm.
And is it always different, or is
always
it?
Different.
I mean, this simple model is capable of delivering unique conversations every time you pick up that phone.
Always.
Oh my goodness.
Every single time. It will never repeat. Always different. I'm loving this conversation that we're having. I don't get to have these conversations with very many people about physics or, AI or whatever, but I do now. I can have better conversations on my phone with an AI than I can with most humans, without a doubt.
All right, I got one more crazy topic for you on this, and then we'll get back into more some serious discussion. This, again, parlays. You set up these transitions perfectly. So if AI can deliver us the genie in the bottle, perfect scenarios, you start putting VR headsets on people, inserting them into the simulations where they can be served by computers that just sets utopia up as it was meant to be. Do you think we're a civilization that's going to end up in the simulation en masse, or do you think we're already in a simulation, or none at all?
Usually, my answer is yes and no, because usually, multiple answers are true at the same time. So yeah, we'll definitely be living partly in that, I do believe. I do spend usually about an hour a day in VR. I love playing Beat Saber
Okay.
and Pistol Whip, so that's my exercise. I'm in VR,
Love it.
doing my thing. Sometimes I take my VR headset to the gym. I don't know what people think of me.
Who cares? Everybody be wearing them in 5 years, so
Right.
no worries.
I do not know who I've almost punched. I also wear AR glasses usually, like on the plane. So when I'm flying back to LA, I'll be wearing my AR glasses. When I flew over here, I had my AR glasses on the plane, and I was watching the AI film from J-Lo, the film that's just come out.
Yeah.
So I was
That was
watching that
good.
on the plane on AR glasses, which was very surreal.
You're like an Inception.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. No. I do have dreams within dreams within dreams.
Yes.
Let me think where I was going with that. But the thing is, we live in a world where we can't tell what's true or not true at the moment. And as we move more into the AI thing with deep fakes, we have absolutely no idea what's true or not true. And that people worry about that. But I don't worry about that, because people used to not use critical thinking to ask if something that they're seeing in front of them is true or not. Now we know everything can be fake. That's great, because now we have to check everything and check whether anything's authentic or not. And so whilst the more time we start to go into VR and spend time in that kind of AI, AR, VR world, we will start to crave actual reality. We will crave going back to nature, lying under the stars, being in the desert, climbing a mountain, having a real conversation with a real person, hearing music that's created by a real person, played by a real person on a real instrument. So the more we go into technology and the more advanced we get, the more we crave things how they were before. So, that imperfection is the hallmark of reality. That's how you know something's real. When it's, if something's absolutely perfect, we say, that's too good to be true.
Yeah.
We start to get suspicious. So I think, that's why things like vinyl comes back, Polaroid comes back. We want things to be imperfect because it gives us a sense that they are real. So I do think in the future, many of the things we're scared we're going to lose, we're going to come to really value, and they'll be really precious. And that will be humans doing things that only humans can do. And I think that's really magical. I just think we're in this liminal space where it's all effed up at the moment. And I think once we can get beyond this, I think we could get to a really magical space. When I do my talks, I often say, well, I talk about 6 reasons the future, maybe more like the past than the present. And I think there's lots of reasons why the future is going to actually seem to be really old-fashioned. And I think if we could get in that time machine and go to the future, forward to the future, we'd step out the time machine, and I think we might think we'd gone to the past, because I think that's what the future has in store for us.
It's that cyclical, perpetual start and beginning the same thing.
Donuts.
So donut. I like your answer, and I want to believe your answer that we would crave the frictions, right? Because it's what makes us human beings.
We do already.
Right, but if we, let's just say we spend so much time in the utopia world where we're delivered everything that we've ever wanted, that we change the brain so much that it doesn't crave those frictions that make us human. I'll give you an example, and this is more on your point. Like, you go on a vacation, and for the first couple of days that you're experiencing everything that's awesome, by like the 8th or 9th day, you're ready to get back to a world that you have some purpose for, instead of just the awesomeness of the vacation.
Yeah. Well, I think the 2 things that are the most important to humans are a sense of community and a source of meaning. And I think if we don't have those 2 things, our mental health takes a really dark dive. So I think humans are always going to need that. We're always going to need to feel connected to people around us. That's our community. And we're always going to need to feel that we're doing something that brings us meaning. So, being in some kind of like utopia world where you have to do nothing, and there is no friction, I don't think humans would survive in that world. I think we have to be doing something.
All right. Yeah. So we're pouring your big brain into the Voices for Autism thing. So I want you to tell me a story, the story of how you got involved in it and what role you play in it, and where your role is going to go in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So So my journey with the tech has been, since I was a child, I've been trying to make the things around me a little magical and interactive without them being all about technology. So I was doing that as a kid in my bedroom and with like wires and switches and things. And then just through the journey that I took, I ended up doing things with conductive ink on posters. And I really like making posters or walls or objects be magically interactive. And I love music and creating a way for you to have a sense of agency that you're creating or producing the music or touching something, so you feel that you're in control. So that's what I was doing, and that led me to Mogfest, and being on stage with a bunch of people like Bootsy, Collins, and Mark Witherspoon. That's how Scott and I met there, and we kind of spoke about that, and then he didn't believe me about what I was saying I could do, and then once he saw it, we started to think about how we could put it to use for doing what we're doing here, where we've made the space, where we made the calming room and the interactive walls, which is a space that's about experience. It's about a journey. It's about something that's magical. It's not something that's about technology. And so it's been great because we've created a real example of that. And we've seen real smiles on people's faces from experiencing what we've created. That's kind of a pilot. So we're excited now about how to scale that up and to take that to other places and how to roll that out. So yeah, that's why I'm here. That's what we've been working on.
Yeah. So you've got to see people interact and use this. So where do you see the evolution going? Like where's the tech going to go in this? Is it, like where do you see it becoming here in 5 years or so?
Wow. It's hard to say where it'll go in 5 years. But really, for me, it's about creating magical human machine interfaces so that you can touch an object that doesn't look like technology. Most of the tech we have on this desk in front of us looks like technology. It doesn't just look like ordinary everyday things. And that's what I want to create, whereas things just look ordinary, like objects you might come across in a forest or something, but that they know how you're interacting with them and they have technology inside them. So the technology is just like within an object.
So merging with it. So it looks like just a regular object, but it has technology that supports it.
Because we've evolved to understand the objects around us. We haven't evolved to understand these objects around us. They're quite alien to us. So how can we put technology into everyday looking things so that a human can touch it and communicate with it in some way and have that experience? So I think once we add AI into that, that's going to be really interesting because it's going to give those objects intelligence as well. Because at the moment with technology, you have to press exactly the right sequence of buttons to make something happen. The classic example is programming the video recorder, right? People don't do that anymore. But it used to be, you talk about how to program your VHS recorder to set the time. No one used to know how to do it.
It got smarter and it did it for us.
Yeah, eventually you don't do that. But you'd be trying to press the right combination of the buttons and it wouldn't be working because it has this sort of like linear technology. But once things have AI in them, the video recorder would have gone, oh, okay, I can see what you're trying to do. Let me set the time for you. You're going to be able to interact with objects where you don't have to do exactly the right thing. It will understand what you're trying to do and your intent, and then it will work with you and communicate with you. Imagine meeting a person that they will only do what you say if you say the exact words in the specific order. If you said the words in any other order or use any other replacement words, they wouldn't listen to you or do something. It'd be really, really hard for us to communicate with each other. So thinking about what we're doing, adding AI into these objects and things that we create as we create these experiences, they're going to become a lot more immersive and magical because there'll be able to be a more natural dialogue between someone playing with something and experiencing something than there is at the moment.
Yeah, and I think of your red phone and the conversations that you have are all original and they are tailored to the person that's on the phone with them. So you take a kid that has autism, the tech can deliver the experience for the measured result of what they need to experience it and learn from it and develop from it.
Yeah. It's going to be so awesome. It's really, really exciting. Yeah, finally we can talk to the objects and the things around us, and then they can start to look more magical. I'm really excited about where everything's going. And, the things that we're doing are just the beginnings of creating some kind of experience. But everything that we create mustn't have our ego in it. It mustn't look like technology. It has to be an experience. It has to be about the person using it. It has to be about putting a smile on someone's face. I say that I like to create things that trigger emotions in other human beings. That's what I want to do. I want to, create an experience that makes someone laugh or cry, be happy, learn something, feel something in some way, because that's what makes us feel human. That's what makes us feel alive, is when our emotions are triggered.
So if someone wants to support Dr. Kate and everything that she's working on, books that you're selling, events that you're doing, or somebody wants to get involved, how do they learn about you and give to you?
Oh, okay, so I have a website,
Okay.
although I haven't updated it for a little while. I bet I had, which is drkatestone.com. DRKATESTONE, Delta Romeo Kilo Alpha Tango Echo Sierra Tango Oscar November Echo.
She went phonetic. I love it.
Or you can get me on ham radio, which is KD2RYD, Kilo Delta 2 Romeo Yankee Delta. That's my radio call sign. Just in case there's an apocalypse, I need my ham radio. On all my socials, I'm Dr. Kate Stone.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can follow me or find me there and see what I'm doing. Have a conversation with me.
All right. Next time you're in town, we're going to do this again because I got more craziness to throw at you. So, but thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you. And I appreciate you and your craziness.
Yes. All right. So we're talking with Mike. Mike was involved in the engineering of the sensory board for Voices for Autism. So I want to talk a little bit about the technical side of thing as well as how you guys got involved. So tell everybody who you are and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. We're so excited to be here. Michael Johnston from MG Electric. Thanks for having us on. I've been a friend with Scott for a long time, Scott Ostalage from Voices for Autism. Scott kind of had this idea for these touch panels. At the beginning, it was just kind of like just a thought in his head, right? Just an idea. And, we talked and he developed these things with, and I know you're going to talk to Dr. Kate. I know she was instrumental with Scott in actually developing this technology. But anyhow, when Scott presented this to me, he said, Mike, we want to put these panels on a wall. They're going to make noise. Kids that have autism or learning disabilities or need a sensory room or need a calming room, need a place to relax and focus on other things, they're going to go in there and put these hands on these things on these panels and they're going to make sounds. I said, Scott, I don't know what you're talking about, but count me in. We're going to figure this out. So as the project developed and, we got to understand the technology a little bit, Scott had tasked us with figuring out a way to implement these systems, put the panels on the wall, basically connect the sound system to it, make it so it's safe, make it so it's presentable for anybody that can put their hands on this, make it so it's easy to operate. So those are the kind of things that we did, and that was our participation in the project.
Yeah, it's not your traditional ask either. I'm sure that this is
Not
one in a
at
million
all,
that comes through your door.
Yeah, and that's what made it really exciting because it isn't the standard thing that we're getting involved in. However, we do all these different pieces, parts of these things in our everyday business. We work with sound systems, we work with electricity, we work with lighting fixtures, those kind of things. But to put them all together in a project of this nature was really exciting. And it's so great to kind of see it now coming to light and getting the word out about this.
So what is your connection to the autism world? Do you have any family members, friends, anything like that?
Well, I think everybody has family members
right?
and friends. Yeah, exactly. And we have a special needs child as well who is, kind of somewhere on the scale. And I think we're all kind of somewhere on the scale, and this is what's great about this project is it's something great for everybody. I mean, I've seen adults and children and, everybody from all walks of life come in and look at these boards and kind of get on there and you just see the wonder in their eyes when they're touching these panels and the sounds that they're making. And Scott with his connections with Genevieve and there's some pretty high power players involved in this thing and that helps elevate it even more for everyone.
And I want to ask you about Dr. Kate. She's one of the most impressive thinkers that I've ever run into.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest difficulty would be to translate the genius mind down to things that are physically possible and, that you, with the tools that are at our disposal, like we don't have magic wands. And so what was the process like of spilling those ideas into like a whiteboard and then figuring out how to get it done?
Well, it basically started with discussions and then turned into drawings and sketches on papers that, we had emailed back and forth, between Dr. Kate and the producer of the panels, over the United Kingdom. And, we didn't really have a whole lot to go on other than we know we want this this end result, right? So we just kind of took that information, took it all in, and coordinated with Scott, and we just kind of, spitballed some ideas and sketched some things on some napkins, like, hey, can we do this? Will
Oh,
this
that's
work?
cool.
How do you feel about this? It really took months to develop. I mean, honestly, years to develop to get to the point where I think we feel pretty confident now. It's like, hey, okay, we can put these panels anywhere. We know how to connect them. We know how to deal with kind of anything that we overcome. And now it's just kind of dealing with any particulars that may be on the exact, the actual site where they're installed.
So let's talk some technicals. And if you were to like cut away one of these panels, kind of give us some of the components. No IP giveaways here.
Yeah.
But what? How do these things work?
So essentially, it works a lot like your smartphone. I know it's a different technology, but if you imagine your cell phone or a touch screen or touch sensitive panel in a 36 by 24 format, 36 inches by 24 inch format. Think of a poster on a wall. And when you think of that poster, imagine if there's, a mountain with some birds flying around it, or a river with some fish swimming in it. You touch the fish and you hear a little gurgling water and maybe some fish chatter. And, there's a little tie in here with Disney, and I'll let Scott talk a little bit more about that with the Disney tie in and kind of how that relates to it. But essentially, that's the end result, is you've got kind of a narrative, a storyboard on for want of a better word, a poster, and you touch certain places on the poster, and it induces a reaction, an audible reaction, which is designed to kind of take your mind off of whatever may be troubling you at the moment and immerse you into this world that you're seeing and touching and hearing.
Yeah, and that cause effect where you do a thing and get a response.
You
That's
got
so
it.
cool.
Exactly.
So now you've seen the technology, you've seen how people are using it. What do you think about the evolution, or what do you think this becomes? Do you think it gets to be bigger and more advanced?
Absolutely. I think when people start to see this, I think you're going to see this implemented everywhere, and I don't hesitate to say, like, every school I think should have this from K through 12, because this isn't like something for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or whatever. I think even adults are interested in this, and I think it could be helpful for them as well. So I think it could be implemented everywhere, and I think that it will in the future.
Beautiful. Any other things that MG's doing? Any exciting projects you guys got going on?
We have so much going on. We're so excited to be here. We do work for everybody, really. We're doing a lot in Youngstown right now. We're so proud to be working for the Youngstown Business Incubator in their Tech Belt building number
Nice.
5, they call it. We're doing a nice renovation project over there. Thank you, guys. We're all over.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming and talking with us. I
So
appreciate
glad
it.
to be here. Thank you.